Now, disparities between men and women in the workplace and business is still a continuous issue. Women are calling on government to make empowerment more accessible. This will be done by engaging with a series of online petitions and virtual protests at the end of August to sign off Women's Month. I'm joined by Doris Sithole, Women of South Africa spokesperson. Doris, thank you very much for joining us. Now, this has been an issue for years now with women, basically being behind all the men. Sometimes in positions, a woman will actually have more qualification to take up a position in a company, but a man is given the job because she just happens to be a woman. Tell me more about these petitions that you'll be doing towards the end of the month.
Thank you so much, Masejo. I think what the movement really speaks to is to address the plight that women have been facing for years. I mean, since the march happened in 1956 by the women in Pretoria, after 64 years, we're still sitting talking about gender inequality. So what we want to do is to ensure that women's voices are heard. The pay gender gap is so big and it needs to be covered. And we've come out to say, if we are not going to come up with practical solutions, this song is just going to continue for centuries and centuries. And we want to be heard, and we want to be heard now. So the petition really speaks to us wanting women to be empowered, having access to resources, access to capital so they can run their businesses successfully, but also bridging that gender pay gap so that we're not sitting back after 100 years and we're still saying the same thing and nothing has been done. So we want organizations to come together. It's a collaborative approach between us and civil society organizations, women in academia, in different industries, and we're saying, let's come together and get things done. It's not just talk anymore. We want practical solutions to be brought to the table.
Now, organizations have protested, for instance, to the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, talking about women not being given a fair chance in business. There's been protests, and if I can put that in, against GBV and femicide. These are things that we've been doing for a couple of years now. What do you think, when do we stop? When are we treated the way that we are meant to be treated and equally to everyone else? And how long must we have these protests and virtual petitions and so on before we're actually heard?
Yeah. Look, I would say we're not going to stop until something actually happens. I mean, I can just talk about the history of South Africa. There are people who probably thought apartheid was not going to end. But there are people who believed that something would change and they kept fighting and fighting. It is just sad that things that come up like, the Women Empowerment and Gender Equality Bill was brought to the table, pushed to the side. Things are brought to the table and there's still people coming back and saying, oh, it's going to be too administrative work for organizations to push and companies. When things are suggested, we need to get to a point where women's voices are heard and things are actually implemented. So we're tired of the lip service, to be quite honest. People have been talking for years, and I would say we are not going to stop until something practical really happens. Solutions are brought to the table. And I think if you talk about the open letter that was released on the 21st of June, some of the things that were highlighted there speak to the fact that we want people to be held accountable so we know what is actually happening on the ground. We don't want to hear stories. People have to be held accountable. Equitable funding allocations, we want to see that from the funding agencies. We want to know what is actually happening on the ground and tap into all the different groups of women, whether it's urban areas, rural areas. Women are struggling in different spheres, and we want to reach out to all those groups and make sure that it is not just one voice of women in the urban areas. It's all of us coming together and saying things need to change, and they need to change now.
Now, obviously the history of patriarchy has put us in this position, and it's a very long history that needs to be corrected, and it's taken quite a while. But of course, if women can't be given fair chance against men, it also means even gender-based violence and femicide, whether it be just verbal abuse against a female just because she's female in the workplace, that's what actually intensifies this, would you say?
Yes, no, definitely. I mean, research also shows that there is a link when you're talking about patriarchy and the fact that some women struggle to deal with abuse. Men become overbearing, but also in line with what we're really pushing for. Research shows that women tend to hold on to abusive partners because of desperation and dependency. So you find that he's beating her up, but she won't leave because she's thinking, what will I do? I'm not financially independent, so I have to stick it out. And in the end, that woman dies. So it is sad that we are still in that situation, and GBV is costly. KPMG released a report in 2014 talking about the fact that ignoring GBV is going to cost us a lot of money. So it does have a bearing on our economy, but also there is a link between GBV and inequality when it comes to the economy, and just not having that balance and ensuring that women are empowered so they can walk away from an abusive relationship because they can look after themselves. But they keep going back. So you've got the social norms that are occurring, and that needs to be addressed. And I'm happy because we've got women who are also part of our movement that represent civil society organizations that focus on GBV in South Africa, and they're contributing immensely in terms of research that is out there so that we make sure that whatever we're putting on the table really speaks to the things that are impacting women in South Africa.
Well, thank you very much. I have to let you go now. Of course, that spokesperson of Women of South Africa, Doris Sithole.